They got the chairs laid out as to where each individual member of the orchestra would sit. And when it came to record that part on, I don't know, the cello or the violin or viola or whatever, he went and sat where that member of the orchestra would have sat.
I'm here with my friend James Turner.
Good evening.
We are recording, and we're going to talk about his new book, which I have here. Very lovely book.
Snap.
And it's about that man who comes on the telly at Christmas, but Roy Wood.
Not Santa Claus.
James can explain that he's a lot more than that, isn't he?
A hell of a lot more. Yeah, it was quite interesting actually doing the book because it's on our friend Sonic Bond,
which is Stephen Lamb's from.
It is exactly. It's the Winter's End and Summer End chaps. It's their imprint, and they've done quite a few books in the series because you've got people, you know, from the old CRS days like Steve Pilkington. He's written quite a few, and our old friend Jez Rowden, he's written a couple as well, and I think there's Jordan Bloom.
So very knowledgeable people.
Yeah, exactly. It covers all sorts of diverse musicians.
Why did you choose Roy Wood then?
Well, for a start, when I looked at the list of what they were publishing and what had been published, a few of the bands I'd have quite liked to have covered have already been covered. You know, I'm not going to go over old ground. And of course, it would be no point whatsoever to Sonic Bond doing that. But I've always been a massive, massive fan of Roy Wood and the work that he did in The Move. You know, like the first DLO album as well, all that sort of stuff. And then you sort of get to the mid-70s and he seems to disappear and just drops off a cliff.
Do you think, because he started doing those Christmas... So I remember when I was a kid, playing in bands, even in the 90s, stuff, Roy Wood would come around and do a Christmas tour.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my mates' bands called The Nerve opened for him once. And that was like, they were like local heroes for doing that. They were like... Roy Wood was a bit of a legend, weren't he?
Yeah.
But he played Northampton Roadmen, but he used to come round every Christmas. But he didn't release an album after like 82, was it?
That's right. The only thing that's been released since has been differing versions of I Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day.
Yeah. And
you know, so it's slightly re-recorded either live with his band. He did a version with Mike Batt. We Wish It Could Be a Wombling.
Have you ever met him?
I haven't. No, I've not. Unfortunately, I've not met.
Apparently, he enjoys the sauce a bit. He's a bit of a boozy enthusiast.
Well, he lives up in somewhere up in Derbyshire,
right?
And there's some people up there who've seen him driving around, and there's
what a brilliant character! I think. I mean, you know,
oh gosh,
in terms of the glam stuff and that, and obviously he was in a very credible psychedelic rock band as well. The Move stuff was the kind of absolutely cutting edge psychedelia at the time, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. And at the time, apparently, quoted in interviews, you know, they asked Roy about the drugs, and he said he likes nothing more than a pint of bitter. Yeah,
I mean, because they got this. They're quite odd because there's a rock and roll thing there, and then there's a sort of psych via. The Sgt. Pepper's sort of feel as well, with the big sort of soaring cellos and stuff.
There's a huge sort of dichotomy between the Move, because on the one hand, you've got the band who've gone up on the covers, sort of the old rhythm and blues scene. So they're playing all the sort of traditional covers to basically, the old school circuit, 3 or 4 gigs a week. You know, and then on the other hand, you've got Roy Wood, who's writing his own material, and he's sort of veering off into psych, a bit later on, bit of rock and roll, all sorts of stuff like that. And you've got, like, in the early days of the Wood, anyway, in the first couple of albums, you got Carl Wayne, who was an effortless frontman.
So when Carl Wayne left, Jeff Lynne joined, is that correct?
That's right, yeah, because in the book, as part of the appendix, I've covered Jeff Lynne's first band, The Idle Race.
Now, The Idle Race are a funny one, because a lot of my mates are proper psych heads, are really into The Idle Race. And they're like, a bit like the Left Bank or something like that, sort of classic psych band. So I don't know this stuff terribly, but what I've heard is really cool. And I'm a big, I do really like Jeffrey. I wouldn't say I was a massive fan, but I've got the albums and the box set and that.
Yeah.
I saw my favourite ELO stuff. I love, like the Out of the Blue and all that, but I love the first two albums. I think they're both brilliant. Oh. And it's interesting. I'm just reading in the book. It's did Roy Wood play on Old England Town, the Boogie number 1, the Boogie number 2 one?
I think so. Yeah, there's a lot of grey areas as to how much Roy actually contributed to ELO Part 2.
Right, because it sounds like the first album, doesn't it?
It does. It's sort of it's a very transitional one, and
it's got a lot of the cello, like the Beatles, very sort of Eye on the Walrus sort of cellos.
Yeah,
and then they've got the picking sequence that's very Abbey Road, but they've got this sort of unique thing as well. It's really cool. I really like that stuff.
It is. It's a very, very interesting. The first album, the Electric Light Orchestra, when you sort of kick in with 10538 Overture. I tell you, who was listening to that, Paul Weller.
Yes.
He play 10538 and Changing Man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So, out of tune 12 string, but you get the gist. But yeah,
I'm sure somebody out there has probably done a mashup of the two, but then Weller's got previous form. If you just listen to the bass line on Taxman, and then head over to Start by the
Yeah, I mean, but if you're gonna take from somewhere, I suppose the Beatles and early ELO is a pretty cool thing to nick from. But I think there's a sort of close mic cello sound that is on the later sort of ELO records are quite lush. But isn't it Wood himself playing cello on it?
Yes, exactly. That's how it does.
Himself.
Yeah, because on one of his later albums, I think it was Mustard. There's a track that's got this dense orchestration on, and basically it's Roy Wood playing every piece of the orchestra. And what he did in the studio, apparently, he got the chairs laid out as to where each individual member of the orchestra would sit. And when it came to record that part on, I don't know, the cello or the violin or viola or whatever, he went and sat where that member of the orchestra would have sat.
I mean, he's a ridiculously talented man, isn't he?
Yeah. Absolutely,
real deal talent, and it's just bizarre that he's not been more. I suppose because people just write him off as the Christmas man, didn't they? And it's a bit like Slade. Actually, Slade are a remarkably good Beatley pop band as well. The bass player's really great, and Slade wrote some really great tunes. I think it's like the Brontosaurus, the Zeppelin-y one. I mean, I love that.
Yeah,
when they went real Zeppelin.
Oh, that's off probably my favourite Move album. I would have to say Looking On, that one.
They went really heavy towards the end, didn't they?
Yeah, Looking On is absolutely bonkers. It is probably their proggiest album. The tracks come in 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes, and they all flip from here, there, everywhere. And you've got Brontosaurus, you've got the title track Looking On, and then you've got the closer, Feel Too Good, which is 9 minutes of real heavy sort of drum beat. That obviously you've got all the heavy industry in the Midlands, which is where obviously Bonham's drumming comes from, and the sort of the sludgy heavy metal of Black Sabbath all from that industrial area.
It's a Birmingham thing, isn't it?
It is. It very much is. And obviously on sort of Feel Too Good, you've actually got Jeff Lynne on drums instead of Bev Bevan, and it's almost the equivalent of sort of Lennon and McCartney knocking up the Ballad of John and Yoko in the studio one afternoon. Ridiculous. And I think it's Doris Troy and P.P. Arnold as well on soulful backing vocals on that Feel Too Good, and it just builds and builds, and it gets heavier and heavier. And
I love that. I love that era when Psych moves through to prog. I love that thing of like the Nice and people like that, and the Zombies, Oddity and Oracle as well. When it was a sort of late it's like late period psychedelia mixed with more progressive arrangements. Like, because I think the first prog albums are like Pet Sounds and Smile's definitely a prog album. And the Beatles, the Beatles Magical Mystery Tour. That psychedelia sort of. There was a massive sort of crossover. And I think like the Nice and stuff. I really like the Nice. I'm not into ELP, but I like that era of people crossing over from just really ambitious pop music.
Exactly. I mean, it's funny actually talking about the Nice. I was listening to that the other day. Actually, I got Ars Longa Vita Brevis off Barax and was giving that a spin.
It's good, isn't it?
It is, and the stuff that they do when with all the classical pieces. It's a lot rawer, a lot heavier, and I think that probably comes from the sort of earthiness of the soul clubs that they were playing, because obviously they started again as P.P. Arnold's backing band.
It's a very soulful sort of, and they lost. By the time Emerson's awesome, don't get me wrong, but by the time Emerson got into ELP, those edges have been sort of smoothed off it, haven't they?
Yeah, I think that's what.
Sorry,
I was going to say I think that's what ELP sort of lacks. Is it's a bit too polished at points.
Yeah, I mean, not 100% my cup of tea, but obviously hugely respect it. So why did he stop making albums then? So did we actually find that out?
I don't really know, it's sort of the last one starting up, which, bear with me 2 seconds.
So that's 80.
Which is possibly one of the worst album covers in the history of album covers.
Oh, bless him. It's the,
I know.
Yeah. It's like 80s bedroom meets Kendo Nagasaki, isn't it?
Yeah. It really is. That really is sort of 80s bedroom. I had a Ferrari clock.
I remember when I was
a very similar style on it, yeah.
And he had one of those Coke bins in the corner. And a dancing Coca-Cola can.
Yeah, that was it. But yeah, that was very... Starting up was... It's very hit and miss. There's some good tracks on there, but obviously went in... It's a lot of electronic sound, sort of synth and stuff like that. And whereas on the Road Again, which is the title track, is quite synth and almost disco driven. While on that album, he's still pulling in all these different instruments, like the sitars, the sax, the orchestra. On Starting Up, he sort of pared that down quite a lot, and I think it loses some of.
So was it a bit like? I mean, I've not heard that one. So I know that I don't like the later ELO stuff when they took all the strings off and went all synthy. Is it a bit like that?
It was a bit like that, but you see. It's funny, that's part of my favourite period of ELO.
What, the Time era and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah, Time. I mean, because they did a few years back, they released Secret Messages. But they did it as the double vinyl, because it was supposed to be a double album, it got cut down. They reinstated most of the tracks, except Beatles Forever, which I don't think Jeff Lynne wants anybody to ever hear. And so they put it back to the sort of double album that it should have been.
And it's good.
And that's pretty good.
Yeah, I haven't heard Time since probably for 25 years since I was a teenager. So, probably 30 years now. But I remember not liking that one as much as the first two, the ones I like best. And I like the pop stuff as well.
Yeah.
And then, but I lost interest towards the end, to be honest. It's a very different band towards the end, ELO, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I mean, obviously, some out of the early period, on the third day, which is where I think Jeff Lynne sort of started to find his feet. Because after, obviously, the first album, him and Roy Wood had pretty much led the move from Looking On, Message from the Country. And, of course, in that period, whilst we were recording the first ELO album, they were going to, put the move down, get rid of it. But they ended up having that spate of those classic top 10 singles, like California Man, Do Ya, Chinatown, all that sort of stuff, which is, if you YouTube some of the videos, some of the performances for that, California Man is just Jeff Lynne doing full on Jerry Lee.
But the thing
Jerry Lee Lewis.
But basically ELO's first album and the end of the move was virtually the same lineup, wasn't it?
It was pretty much. It was also recorded pretty much at the same time. So if you listen to Message from the Country, which is the last Move album, that's got a lot shorter stuff on there. There's some classic psych, actually, going back on that.
Mm.
You know, it's a lot more, I think all the complex stuff, the stuff they were putting with cellos, pieces like Nellie Takes a Bow, which drifts into God Rest You Merry Gentlemen in the middle.
It's weird. The early ELO stuff's really weird because it's quite dark, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's got the cellos are really close mic, so you get that sort of ELO sort of Eleanor Rigby sort of thing going.
Yeah.
With what's his name? And did Roy Wood play all the strings on that?
I think on the first album he did, and then by the time obviously they got some sort of touring lineup, you've got, I think it was Mervyn Gale and Hugh McDowell.
I remember reading a story about when they tried to play it live, and no one had ever tried to do an orchestra, strings with the band live.
Yeah,
and they said it was a nightmare. I think it was to get the ELO sound to work live was a. So, why did Roy Wood leave ELO? Was that they thought they fell out? Did they?
They didn't really. I think a lot of the stories in the press and the contemporaneous discussions are that Roy decided he was going to leave because ELO was a partnership between him and Jeff. And of course, because Roy had been the one who'd written all the hits, he was coming out with the hair up, the face paint, all the extravagant stuff, whereas obviously Jeff Lynne just hides behind his shades.
Yeah. I think that's it. Cool dude, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Roy was, all the attention was obviously on Roy Wood because he'd come from a successful band. He got the pedigree, he got the heritage. And but again, when you look back as well, at the time they were both managed by Don Arden. And you do wonder a little bit if Don Arden thought, well, hold on.
It's ELO. Two for the price of winning.
Yeah, ELO aren't really doing that much, but we've got Roy here who's dab hand at writing hit singles. Maybe we'll get him, udge him off somewhere. And again, when it was Wizzard, again, you had that thing with like the first album, Wizzard Brew, which is absolutely bonkers. None of the singles were on that.
I haven't heard that one. Is that quite?
Oh, it's absolutely crackers.
It's weird because Wizzard. I always think of Wizzard as more the sort of post Phil Spector rock and roll wall of sound stuff. What's that about?
This one, it's got the original album has got 6 tracks on it.
So it's well prog.
It is well prog, and it's absolutely bonkers. You've got one piece is almost like an old military marching song, Jolly Cup of Tea it's called. And then you've got another one, Buffalo Station, Get On Down to Memphis, which is Roy again doing the full-on rock thing. But it's about 7 or 8 minutes, and
it's a weird one because he's a hugely talented dude. And I think in the 70s, if you had hit singles, it was seen as a sort of, you on the naughty step, weren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Incredible, a credible artist. But, I mean, I'm not a massive Roy Wood expert, but I know the Move stuff. I know ELO, the ELO stuff. And, from my understanding, he's a remarkably talented musician.
He is. He's very, very talented. And, of course, again, with the singles, obviously you've got Ballpark Instant, See My Baby, Jive, Angel Fingers, Wish It Could Be Christmas Every Day. That's a hell of a run of singles.
A lot of those singles
on the album.
You just say the name to me, and even though, like I say, it's not something I've delved into, but I know those tunes inside out. But so he carried on making the. When did he stop doing Wizzard then?
Well, Wizzard, the last album that was released as Wizzard was Eddie and the Falcons, which again, it goes more back to his rock and roll roots. So you've got songs on there that sound a bit Roy Orbison-y, songs on there a bit Del Shannon. And of course, that sort of thing is the music that him and Jeff Lynne liked anyway, because which one is it? It's one of the ELO remasters, Discovery, I think. It's got a version of ELO, well, it's Jeff Lynne in the studio covering Del Shannon's Runaway. And of course, Jeff Lynne almost asked Del Shannon to join the Travelling Wilburys after Roy Orbison died.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but then I think Del Shannon killed himself.
Oh, God, yeah.
But yeah. But the thing is with the Eddie and the Falcons, it was supposed to be, again, a double album with one side the rock and roll and the other side moving more into jazzier areas because Roy was being turned on to jazz by the 2 saxophonists out of Wizzard.
Right.
Mike Burney and Nick Pentelow, and that one came out in 2000. Because I think 1999, the Edsel label, they remastered Mustard and Eddie and the Falcons with bonus tracks, which is the first time I think they'd been available on CD. And they dug out an entire album of unreleased material, which is Main Street, which should have been the companion disc to Eddie and the Falcons, and which just was never released until 99, 2000.
Cool. So, what's your favourite era of Roy Wood?
Oh, I'm a massive. I mean, I like the stuff on the Move, and I think the Moved stuff has got to be the Jeff Lynne Roy Wood era of the Move, because you've got two songwriters in the band, so there's not cover versions on the albums, and you know that sort of period leading from the Move into ELO. Those sort of three albums, Looking On, Message from the Country, Electric Light Orchestra, they're absolutely brilliant. And again, even the Wizard Bruce stuff is absolutely fantastic. But I've got quite a soft spot, actually, for late 70s Roy Wood, because he re-signed to ELO and released a spate of singles that did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I suppose post-punk, it must have been quite hard for him.
Yeah, because what he tried to do, he had Wizzo Band, which was 76, and that was when he moved off more into the sort of jazz kind of thing. Mm. And so if the last thing you heard was Eddie and the Falcons, I mean, if you think, oh, Roy Wood's got a new album out, put it on, and it's extended jazz workouts, you know, you're going to think, what the hell? But like I mentioned in the book...
It's quite hard for us to... and I've read quite a bit in the book. I've sort of not quite finished it yet, but I've read quite a bit of it. It's really well written. It's excellent, James.
Oh, thank you.
As is all your work. You're a long-term follower of what you've written. So, but what I'd say is it's one of the things that comes across very clearly in the book is how fast pop music was barely progressing at the time. It's insane. You know,
it's madness, isn't it?
I mean, the majority of his recording career was, you know, middle of the 60s to 82. So what's that period? That's sort of 16 years or so, yeah? 16, 17 years, yeah? So that's... You know, Radiohead have released 3 albums within that time from the last 16 years. So it's, you know, it just makes you realise how slow pop music's progressed really in the last 20 odd years compared to the, you know, if you look at 1965 through to 1985, when progression was just in, you know, from the Beatles to the stirrings of hip hop, and you know, and dance music in, you know, that 20-year period, and then compare it to the last 20 years, and you know. It must have been an incredible time to be alive to see that music progressing that fast.
It must have been, and you know, the fact that Roy sort of continued and just did what he felt he wanted to do, and I think because his last solo album before starting, his last solo album of the 70s, On the Road Again, wasn't even released in the UK when it came out.
Really?
It was released in Germany and Canada, and that was only because the boss of Warner Brothers insisted it was put out. And yet you've got Carl Wayne on there. You've got John Bonham on drums.
I suppose in those days things were either you couldn't be a cult artist like you can now. You can't be a big trainer or some, you know, who sells, you know, 10,000 copies. In those days it was either a hit or it wasn't, was it? Yeah,
exactly. And you know, there's still video footage of, again, on YouTube, which is an invaluable resource.
Yeah.
Particularly when I was writing the book. Some of the albums that I've talked about weren't even available. I mean, Discogs was fantastic to get my copy of Wizzo Band and On the Road Again on CD.
Have Esoteric been reissued? Is that correct?
They have, yeah. Esoteric have reissued Mustard, Eddie and the Falcons, and Main Street, basically the same ones that Edsel reissued. So I think Edsel did a pretty good job in the the late 90s, early 2000s, of digging around for tapes, because there's been no additional bonus tracks on the Esoteric apart from one on Main Street, which snuck out on a midline compilation a few years ago. But what I'd like to see, because as I mentioned in the book, you know, you can't get On the Road Again or Wizzo Band for Love Nor Money on CD. I think On the Road Again's only available as one of those bargain. You know, they do this cardboard slipcase where it's sort of pared back albums.
Yeah.
Like 15 quid. But why would I spend 15 quid to get 4 albums I already own just for one album I don't? You know. And so I kind of hope Esoteric get their hands on those two, because they were both Warner Brothers. And I think Esoteric have got a fairly good relationship with Warner Brothers, because obviously a lot of the Parlophone stuff, or the Harvest Parlophone stuff, like they've been releasing with Bebop Deluxe and Bartley James Harvest early albums. That was all part of Warner catalogue, which they hived off.
Because Mark's really good. He's really, I mean, the good thing about Esoteric and Mark and Vicky, Vicky's so sound, and Mark is he's really into it. He's the real deal. He's a proper music nerd. He's brilliant.
He's a real crate digger, isn't he?
Oh, he's lovely. Yeah, I mean, he's the real. You know, he's the real deal. He's really into it. You know what I mean? It's like,
oh yeah, it's funny because I can't remember what I was listening to. I pulled some old reissue from EMI from years ago out to listen to. Might have been a Fantagraph Generator one, something like that. And of course, Mark's all over that. Sleeve notes and everything.
He used to deal with the box sets, didn't he?
Yes.
And all the extra tracks, and you know, he's but no, he's great. I think you need people that are genuine. I think it's not the sort of thing you can fake enthusiasm for. You have to be into it. But yeah, I mean, I'll just say you did a fantastic job. And I've not seen anything on Roy Wood before like this. Is there anything else comparable?
I don't think there is like this. There's biographies out there and other sort of looks at his career, but I don't think anybody's ever gone from the first. No.
What would you say your influences as journalists were? What writers do you like?
Oh, I'm a massive, massive fan of Stuart Maconie.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
I've always liked Stuart Maconie, and I remember reading a quote ages ago about music journalism. I can't remember who said it, but somebody was talking about, you know, how do they sort of find new albums and new artists? And somebody said, he said, well, you know, you buy your music magazines, you read the reviews, and if there's a reviewer in there who agrees with you on 90% of things, the chances are that'll be where you get it from. So obviously Stuart Maconie, I've always been a big fan of Stuart Maconie. There's a guy called Rob Chapman as well. I think he wrote for Mojo Record Collection.
Chapman, yeah.
Yeah, he in my first
Psychedelia a few years ago.
That's him, yeah. Well, he lectured at the university I went to. So in my first year, I had a year at Warrington, which wasn't the greatest. I sort of switched courses pretty much after that. But this was one of the best lectures. I remember him coming in to talk about musical history and theory. And he started with a Sun Ra quote. Yeah. History is his story. Mystery is my story. And then launched off on that. And he was heavily into Hawkwind at the time, which I was. So, you know.
Yeah, no, I like Hawkwind, yeah.
Talk about prog and psych with him till the cows come home.
I think one of the other ones I've always is, you know, Ian McDonald, Revolution in the Head.
Yeah.
Which is kind of, you know, also that sort of format of taking it apart. And I love books like this. I mean, it's, you know, I love anything that's in depth. It takes pop and rock music seriously. But the Move were a funny one, because when I was a kid, I had the best of the Move when I was about 18, 19, and they were never a really cool band to be into, like the Idle Race or the Left Bank or you know, all those sort of 60s bands. But it was all the singles, and I remember it had like Brontosaurus on, and I was just like, this is absolutely brilliant. I loved it.
Yeah.
I thought it was like, when you used to get those compilations for like $2.99 or something. with it, you know, but Castle Communications job.
Yeah, that's the one, the Essentials. Yeah,
and I had all the singles, and I absolutely loved it. And I thought the Move were brilliant, and that's how I got into the first two ELO albums. And I think it's really cool what you've done here to have a book that covers all that stuff. And so I'm part way through reading it and I shall finish it because it's really good. So congratulations.
No problem. I thought one thing I really wanted to include on there as well is the Idle Race stuff. Because I think that is integral to the sort of whole Move story, because Jeff Lynne invited Roy Wood to join the Move, I think, when Trevor Burton left, and Jeff Lynne wasn't interested because they were doing their second album.
It's bizarre that, you know, once again, it's one of those weird things. You can have Jeff Lynne and Roy Wood, you know, being mates, and, you know, it just seems an abundance of talent.
absolutely.
Wasn't it, in Britain? So
yeah, it really was. And of course, on one of the later tracks, one of the B-sides, you've got Roy Wood and Noddy Holder singing.
Really?
On one of the ones from which one is it now? Then hold on.
I must say, I do like Noddy's voice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think which one it is actually. It's cool. I think it's the driving song. I think on Roy Wood's Helicopters. It's one of the later EMI singles.
But do you remember there was that Rock Family Trees about the Birmingham scene? Do you remember?
Yeah. Oh, God, I used to tape those.
Me too. Yeah. I remember them saying, about they used to all meet on the motorway. There'd be Sabbath and Roy Wood and those all the Birmingham scene, the Idle Race. It just seems incredible now, doesn't it? That
it's bizarre because obviously I remember watching those and we were talking about the Idle Race and everything. And I don't know about you, but I used to go to. I mean, my local town for records was Rotherham, and it had 2 independent record stores. So you could go delve through them. There was a great record fair that used to come to the library on a Saturday, first Saturday of every month. So me and my mate Dave, we'd go to the record fair with our 10, 15 quid. And that's actually, I know, probably shouldn't talk about the virtues of vinyl because David will be watching this. And
no, I mean, it was a magic to it in those days because the things like an Idle Race album or even an early ELO album, they weren't everywhere, were they? You couldn't just pick them.
They weren't. You could really pull out some random bargains. But of course, I think when I was doing all this early collecting, it was sort of 92?
Yeah,
93.
I would have been looking for vinyl records then, yeah.
But the thing is, you see, at that point, we were quite lucky because your first adopters of CDs had already binned all their vinyl.
Yeah.
So you were picking up mint conditions, of stuff that hadn't even been reissued on CD yet.
Or
if it had.
There was I remember buying a lot of heavy metal albums around that time, and a lot of Van Halen, Ozzy Osbourne, and Black Sabbath, and Iron Maiden.
That's where I got most of my Sabbath stuff from.
And then as we got older, the psychedelic stuff came in, and like the Move, and what else were we into? A lot of psych stuff, and a lot of American hardcore, and the punk stuff as well. So, record collecting, because you couldn't just download it whenever you wanted. Record collecting, if you found a Dead Kennedys album, it was exciting because you couldn't forget it.
Yeah,
you'd never heard those songs before.
I know, and of course you didn't have Wikipedia or whatever.
No.
My knowledge of Move and Idle Race albums was gleaned from. God, it was some sort of encyclopedia of rock that was in W.H. Smith's in Rotherham. So if I had like 10, 15 minutes to
pop in, have a look
before the bus, pop in and those. And of course, at that stage, the Idle Race albums weren't on CD. You couldn't get them for love nor money. And because they were always, like, say, a cult band, you couldn't find the vinyl.
But I think in terms of the cool, the Idle Race were a lot cooler than the Move, weren't they? But, like I said, I think Roy Wood suffered that people didn't take him seriously because he had so many hit singles, and he had the audacity to have a Christmas hit single, which is like the worst thing you can do in credibility wise, isn't it? And a massive Christmas single. Probably that one and the Slade one, the 2 biggest Christmas singles of all time, aren't they?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's probably a book somewhere about how come is it these 2 bands from Birmingham cranked out these mammoth Christmas singles.
It's bizarre, isn't it? That most people would know Roy Wood purely for that, for the Christmas song. But he did do an incredible amount of stuff, and remarkable guy. Have you seen him live recently?
I've not. No, I've never actually seen him live.
I haven't either.
I was hoping. I mean, rumour had it that if he toured last year, he was going to play Western, but obviously, under current circumstances, all that's been sort of kiboshed. So I'm hoping when he is on the road again, I'll be able to get to go see him. I'll take him a copy of the book.
Is he aware of the book? Do you know?
He is, yes, because I've got some people, obviously, knowing people in the industry who know him, and they sent an email off to him asking if he wanted involvement. But he's quite a shy, despite the whole thing, he's quite a private person.
Well, quite often the most flamboyant performers are the ones who are the most shy because, they're hiding behind something, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
The easiest way to deal with being on stage is to hide behind a ton of makeup and a beard, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't blame him, to be honest. But yeah, it's a real, because I know he did the. I think he's done the festivals, but I know he always does he seemed to always do a Christmas tour when I was a kid in the 90s. He
does. I think he still does. Because I think a couple of years ago, my mum went to see him.
Really?
I can't remember where, but she went to see him in his band. But you see, she grew up in the 60s.
Of course, yeah.
She was 18 in six. Oh, I know. She was 18 in mid to late 60s anyway.
So she timed it perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. She used to see the Everly Brothers when they were playing in the 60s, and then when they reunited, they used to come to Sheffield every couple of years. So she'd go and see them then as well.
Amazing. Right, I think we've covered everything for the book for now. Just before we go, James, I just want to ask you, what are you listening to at the minute, mate?
What am I listening to at the minute? I am listening...
Something interesting to tell me.
I have been listening to Steven Wilson, actually.
Oh, you got the new album?
No, I haven't yet. I've got it on pre-order, but I realised I didn't have the last one, To the Bone.
It's all right. So
it's really good. I can't see why people were all kicking off.
I don't understand. No one hates Steven Wilson like Steven Wilson fans.
I know. Well,
weird. It's a cult, isn't it?
It's really odd, because you can draw a line from To the Bone to the very early stuff that he was doing with Tim Bonus in No Man, all the way through stuff like Piano Lessons and Four Chords That Made a Million.
I think a lot of his fans arrived because I was into Porcupine Tree in '95 with Voyage 34, and I went to see them on the Voyage 34. I saw at the Roadmender in '96, and that was the last time. And I forgot all about them after that.
Yeah,
I thought they'd split up because I used to go and see Ozric Tentacles, Porcupine Tree, and there was bands like Chumbawamba and that kind of scene. So hippie space rock, indie rock stuff. And I thought I forgot all about it. I couldn't believe it when I found out in 2010 that Porcupine Tree were playing the Royal Albert Hall. It's it just seemed unbelievable to me. But what had happened? They'd released those metal albums at the three or four metal albums, and they acquired a whole new fan base. And it seems like that fan base didn't know about the pop stuff. They didn't know about Voice 34. They didn't know about
all the Psych stuff.
Yeah.
I saw them, I think, just before Signify was released.
I love that. Yeah, it's a great album.
Because they actually headlined Rotherham Rocks that the Classic Rock Society put on at the Herringthorpe Leisure Centre in Rotherham in '96. They probably paid for about 60 or 70 people in a leisure centre on the outskirts of Rotherham. I was there. I'd seen them at Nottingham Rock City beforehand. And bear in mind, this was in the days when Steven Wilson he didn't like the prog hat label being applied to his music at the time. I think
it's kind of understandable in the 90s because it was like there's a very judgmental scene then, weren't it? You can sort of get away with it now because Mars Volta and Radiohead and people like that, and it's kind of not quite so frowned upon. I think younger people as well haven't got the snobbery that people in the 90s had about music. I think younger kids are a lot more open-minded now.
Agreed.
Prog. But what was that gig like? The Rotherham Rocks one?
That was absolutely brilliant. It played Voyage 34 for a start. They did a lot of the Sky Move Sideways and a couple of the new tracks. I think they were selling Signify before it was officially released on the merch.
Most of their albums have got some good stuff on. They're really good band in that. It's good on them. And I think the reason they did so well is because they worked harder than anyone else. They toured more and released more albums.
Exactly.
They did it for 20 years and they worked hard and they were good at it.
Yeah.
And his records sound good. They're really well produced.
Well, that No Man stuff that he does, because I really love Tim Bonus's voice.
Yeah, Tim's great, yeah.
Yeah, but that last one, did you hear the last one?
The disco one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I like that.
It's absolutely brilliant, isn't it?
It's cool. Tim's a really talented guy as well. So I just don't understand Steven Wilson fans. I think it's unless it's prog metal or it's the Raven where he was doing. I mean, What I mean, like I say, I'm not an expert on his stuff. I like his stuff. I'm not an expert, but
Yeah.
the only album he's ever put out, and I thought, oh, not so keen, is The Raven, because I just thought it
Okay.
just sounds like too much like King Crimson and 70s prog. And I thought, well, what you're doing here, mate, is giving them what they want. And I thought this is a bit, but looking back on it now, The Raven's actually a really good album, and it's this, this has got some Drive Home. It's a fantastic record.
Yeah, Drive Home's brilliant. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it is very much in the 70s prog style, but it's incredibly well done. I mean, it's classy, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I was listening to it, Hand Cannot Erase today
That's great, yeah. Good album.
as well. I put that on, and some of the stuff on there is absolutely brilliant.
It's like a prog Manic Street Preachers album, isn't it? It's really
Yeah.
odd album. But yeah, and I'll have a listen on Friday to the new album, and good on him. I mean, I'm glad he's doing well. I don't understand why people go, oh, this bloke's successful, he's sold out. It's like, well, he's doing well, good on him. You know what I mean? Life's too short.
Yeah, exactly. I think that is a problem with so many scenes, isn't it? What was it? What was it? We hate it when our friends become successful. Who said that? Was that Morrissey? Yeah. Yeah. Let's not.
We don't talk about Morrissey anymore.
Headlining the Festival of Brexit.
Yeah, he'll be the sole headliner.
Him and Lawrence Fox.
MC Lawrence Fox and Morrissey headlining. I don't know. Didn't the Who vote for Brexit? Didn't they?
Oh, Daltrey didn't. And now he's all up in arms about the fact he can't tour Europe. Yeah.
And same with iMode. No, Bruce Dickinson to say. I'd be surprised if Townsend voted for Brexit though, because he's quite sharp, and but there you go. I'll get myself in trouble now if I start talking about this.
And I know we will, won't we? And then we'll get all the people, get all the commentators. Yeah, get all the commentators underneath.
But
we'll get all the Facebook commentators saying, "Oh, you can't talk about politics when you're talking about music."
Yeah, like the Beatles never talked about politics.
No, absolutely.
When the early days of psychedelia, politics and music have been fundamentally entwined. In Woodstock and the Beatles, a revolution, and it's impossible to take music from its social context, isn't it?
I'd say you go even further back than that, because folk music, all the folk songs, of course, they're all songs of rebellion and protest.
Yeah, I agree. And if rock and roll at its roots is white people playing black people's music. So, it's quite politically charged, starting off, isn't it? So, there's a lot of civil rights stuff early on as well. So, which is great. That's why it's exciting. I think that's why we need the element of politics there. But, I don't want to be Ben Elton, but I think it's quite useful to talk about these issues. What I mean? All right, mate. I think we're done.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, James.
No problem at all, pal. Thank you.
I'm going to stop recording.